do at the services throughout this day is to have various speakers talk a little bit about what's going on at Christ School and just to bring you up to date on the happenings over there. And I was scheduled, you'll notice in your service sheet that I was scheduled to speak at the 7:30 service this morning and now at this one. And these two young men that are here with me this evening were scheduled to speak at the 9 o'clock and the 11:15 service, which they did. But I was also at the 9 o'clock service, and I listened to them speak, and I made an executive decision that their talk was much better than mine, and that you would be better served by listening to them this evening than to listen to the headmaster. With that, I would like to introduce to you, first of all, Emmett Komsky, who is presently an 8th grader at Christ Episcopal, and Cole Gary, who is a 9th grader. They both have been students at Christ since pre-K, and they are among the best and the brightest that we have at our school. Let me just set up the talk just for a second. What they're going to be speaking about is something called our operating principles. And those operating principles were adopted about 4 years ago. And we asked the students at Christ to tell us how, in their daily lives at school, they imitate or they could imitate Christ. So I had hundreds of responses from kids, and we narrowed down all those suggestions that they made. We took the ones that were repeated and the ones that resonated the most with us, and we ended up with 6 operating principles for students, and that's what they will speak on today. So first, Emmett.
Welcome all of you to Christ Episcopal School Sunday. Today, I've been asked to discuss with you the relationships between today's gospel and Christ Episcopal School's operating principles. The 3 operating principles that I have selected to discuss are: do a good deed daily, embrace differences, and be kind, be kind, be kind. Later, Cove Gary will be discussing the school's other 3 principles. But for now, I would like to spend some time relating each one of these first 3 principles to today's gospel. The first principle I'd like to discuss is be kind, be kind, be kind. As the eldest of 3 brothers, I would love to practice the saying, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But being kind, as you can imagine, is much harder. My little brothers and I get in fights all the time, and if I had a dime for every time my parents told me to be the bigger man and not hit them back, I'd be at the top of the Forbes 500 list. As a matter of fact, when I was thinking about what story I could tell about my brothers and I fighting, I realized I would just have to tell you my life story. It's pretty hard to always be kind, but I'm working on it. The other day, my parents had NPR radio on in the car during the drive to school. They were talking about a 78-year-old man who had just been released from jail after being falsely convicted of murder when he was only 42. 36 years in prison, and what do you think he said when he was released? He said it was a glorious experience, and he appreciated every moment of it. How can someone find the kindness in their heart to be kind to those people who both prosecuted and persecuted them, just like it says in today's gospel? That is what being kind is all about. Embrace differences. Today's gospel says, and if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than the others? When Miss Sherry, our Christian ed teacher, asked me to do this sermon, she gave me the modern day version of the gospel reading. It reads, if you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Today, people like to be with other people who are like them. Republicans listen to Fox News and Democrats listen to CNN. But the way that we grow and change is by being with people who are different than ourselves. That's how we mature mentally and spiritually. In the gospel it says, if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. If you're confined to your own reality, you won't be able to see that someone needs a cloak. And that segues into the final principle that I relate to today's gospel. Do a good deed daily. You can do a good deed that makes others happy, but just as importantly, you can do a good deed that fulfills your own life. My parents constantly say to us that attitude is everything. So it's up to you. Do you want to make your life better? This year in Miss Sullivan's language class, we read the book To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Agnes Finch demonstrated all three of these principles at once while defending a young man against an accusation of a racially motivated crime in the 1930s. He embraced racial differences well before the Civil Rights Movement. He did a good deed by putting his reputation on the line in order to guarantee a fair trial, and he was obviously the epitome of kindness in the manner he acted towards everyone. I'm sure that all of you would be happy to know that even in language class, we're learning God's principles and the school's principles.
Good evening. My name is Code Bury, and I'm a freshman at Christ Episcopal High School. Like Emmett, I'm going to talk about the rest of Christ operating principles, but first, I'd like to talk a little bit about myself and my time at Christ Episcopal. So I've been going to CES since pre-K, almost as long as I can remember. And a lot of growing has happened over the course of those years. Of course, physically, I'm just about at the age where people have trouble recognizing me. They haven't seen me in a few years, so there's that. But the growing that I'm talking about is a shift, a gradual change in my environment at Christ. Let me explain. My pre-K grade was separated into a few different homerooms. We learned to write our names, tie our shoes, that was big, and sit in a circle. But I'm going to be honest, none of us had any clue that the other homerooms even existed. We were just happy to sit in our own little bubble and do whatever pre-Kers do. Now, let's fast forward all the way to middle school. A bit amount has changed. With a class size of more or less 60 kids, we all know each other pretty well. But the dramatic shift was in that pre-K bubble. From playing on the spacious playground, to paddling in the Christwood Pond, to just walking around the campus, maybe a trip to the barn. Whatever it was, that bubble expanded. Christ began to build up a pretty remarkable level of independence and responsibility in each of us. So now it's finally happened. We're in high school. For better or for worse, the freshman class size is about 20 students, while the total high school size is about 60 students. By now, that bubble has pretty much exploded, which leads me to the first operating principle that I want to talk about. Listen to what others have to say. On a small scale, we at Christ are very much like a family. In respect to my freshman class, sure, we've seen people come and go, but we've been through a lot over the years. For students both old and new, we're extremely tight-knit. We all eat lunch together in the same place. A little while ago, there was a movie night of sorts for the high school. Not only did just about all of us show up, but afterwards we all grouped together to play a card game. But this family actually extends much farther than just a single grade. Everywhere you look, you'll see the environment at Christ Episcopal building a culture of togetherness that I personally find pretty amazing. I can't think of a better example of this than the Philosophy Club. The Philosophy Club consists of a group of students ranging all the way from freshmen to seniors. As you'd expect, the older students tend to be more opinionated in the discussions, while us younger students are there to think and learn. But that doesn't stop us from asking questions or explaining our positions. And when we do, all the other students are silent, listening to what we have to say, even when it doesn't make that much sense. So here's another example. Last Halloween, the Key Club ran an event in which the students went trick-or-treating for canned goods for the food bank. To say that the student body rallied towards this effort would be an understatement. We had multiple cars driving to various neighborhoods to collect food in the rain. There may have been a bit of competition between cars, sure, but what stands out to me is that those teams consisted of all high school grades, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. They were driven by seniors, and everybody got along. Our family at Christ gets along just by listening to what others have to say. And as for the food bank, we ended up donating more than 1,700 pounds of food to the Cunnington Food Bank, which ties in nicely with the next operating principle: reach out and help others. Whether it's visiting members of Christwood, playing with and taking care of Caritas, or growing fresh fruit and vegetables for the food bank, every grade level has a unique service funding program. As for the high school, we are required to have so many service hours, but there are also a variety of other programs and opportunities. For example, I know that some upperclassmen will be taking a week-long mission trip this year. In today's gospel, Jesus said, "Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you." Christ promotes this idea that it's not just about punching in so many service hours in order to shut the breach grade. And I believe this mindset echoes throughout the student body. So finally, we reach the last operating principle: respect others, see God in everyone. The second part of this principle, see God in everyone, is what speaks to me. So I'm going to be honest. When I say that we're like a family, I don't mean one big, happy family. Like Emmett was saying, it's easy to get into fights with your little brothers. We can't be perfect,